What's going on, Wolfpack Nation? Welcome back for part 2, y'all, of our episode here with PHILLIP Danford from Inside Pack Sports. If you haven't checked out part 1 yet, make sure to go right back, check that first and foremost, and then come right back here for part 2 here as we continue this conversation here to more talk about the two primary concerns on the offensive side, which are over the offseason, primarily the wide receivers and offensive line. But before we get into that, one thing which I wanted to bring up, is that there's been a big thing has been a common trend, a common hype trend over this offseason I just cannot buy into, and that's Florida State. For me, Florida State, to me, I mean, there's no doubt about it. You look at the papers, you look at, the depth charts, the rosters, everything, there's no doubt they have a great team, bringing back Jordan Travis, bringing back a good amount of the production from last year, having one of the top, transfer portal classes, having a great freshman recruiting class. I mean, they have everything. I mean, they have all the guys in the world. But to me, still the biggest thing is at the end of the day, I still don't have all the faith in the world in Mike Norvell, just because of the fact that, he's won. It's kind of crazy, but a lot of people don't even realize, and it took me a while to even realize this, even like a couple months after the season ended, that he won 10 games last year. Like, oh wait, he won 10 games? Oh my gosh. Didn't even realize that, just because all I could think about was how he decided to have Jordan Travis throw a post corner when all he needed was a field goal to beat us last year. I'm like, that's the coach that you think is going to win the ACC championship and have a chance at the college football playoff? This is still a guy who came from Memphis, which, he did well at Memphis, but it was Memphis. And then this is a guy who just 2 years ago was on the hot seat that, this guy was about to get fired. And then he falls into a great quarterback in Jordan Travis. And then I think that, he did finally what I thought should have been very easy for the coach, who preceded him, which is, you're at Florida State. Just go out to any recruiter and say, hey, yeah, listen. So I coach at the school that had Deion Sanders, that had Jalen Ramsey, that had Jameis Winston, that had Bobby Bowden, that had Derwin James, and I want you to come play for me in Florida against Miami and Florida in the ACC. And then, I would assume that most recruiters would be like, absolutely, sounds like a plan, sign me up. But I don't know, Phil. Just to me, I get it because the players are ridiculous, no doubt about it. But just, do you have more faith in Florida State maybe as a potential, AC champion than I do?
They'll be good. They'll be good. I have concerns. We've seen Jordan Travis go down with injury before. I'm not sure they have not been able to win without him. That's been a constant over the last few years. Travis goes down, they've lost. The other thing is, and I've made this comment on our IPS podcast, me and James were discussing the ACC, is, as I watch these guys coming into Florida State, which it felt like they got everybody in the transfer portal there for a while, right?
Everybody. Mm-hmm.
But when I look at these guys like Bell, the tight end out of South Carolina, the wide receiver they just got out of Michigan State, I do wonder, especially when you kind of read their interviews and their comments. I've said it before. They kind of sound like me guys, and there's only one ball that goes around. And I wonder how all this works. These guys are not coming to Florida State to necessarily play second fiddle, right? They brought in some big name players who were probably going to be option 1A at whatever school they were just at, and they come here. And how does that get spread? What is the culture like? And so I think that's one of the bigger kind of potential downfalls of bringing in all these highly rated guys at one time. What is the expectation amongst themselves for production and everything else that goes with it?
Well, especially too, because coming right out of the gate, LSU is coming to your house. So, I think that if you stumble on LSU, then that can be, just the small fire, the small flame that needs to be, set to light off that firecracker in the locker room, where all of a sudden all these guys are saying, well, I should have gotten the ball more, or, I should have been playing more. It doesn't take much when you don't have that chemistry, that locker room, combination. And then, you got, Southern Miss right after that for FSU, which, if you lose to LSU and then if you even make it a game against Southern Miss, then now it's really getting, crazy. And then 2 games after that, you go to Clemson. And so that, that could be the nail in the coffin, if you're, you are really correct, Phillip, and they stumble and then, they face all those locker room issues. So, which again, comes back to coaching. Like that's the biggest thing, is talking about coaching. And Phillip, I want to ask you, plainly, for, a guy like Dave Doeren, I want to kind of ask you this question. If Dave Doeren decided tomorrow morning to put out a press release and say, I am retiring from coaching and I am out as the NC State football head coach, which would be, man, that'd be really bad. But if that were to happen, in this world, where would you put Dave Doeren as on the all-time NC State coaching list?
No,
what have you done right now?
So a couple of those guys I didn't see play, right? I didn't see them coach. Lou Holtz and all. They're a little before my day.
Sure.
I mean, I am one of the guys who says probably the current iteration is the best iteration in the sense I think modern day basketball players today are better than they were in the 80s, right? I think LeBron James dominates, back then. And I mean, I know there's that discussion, James and Jordan, all that stuff. I think what Dave Doeren has done against a league in which everybody wants to win, everybody puts money and resources into it, and you're recruiting against the SEC and this powerhouse. And I mean, just look at all the teams that come into North Carolina and grab quality players, and you've got to fight against that, and you've got to find these kind of hidden gems like a Jalen Samuels, very under-recruited guy. I mean, to me, I'm putting him at the top of the NC State list, right? Especially for what I've seen. But, I mean, I just think doing it now is harder. I really do. And if you're excelling in this current day and age, I'm giving you a little more bump and credence than, some of the, older coaches. And part of that might be, let's face it, a little age-related bias maybe. But, I mean, that's just kind of how I see it, right? Everybody's trying to win now. And it's hard, right? It's hard.
Yep. Yeah, no, again, I mean, and the craziest part is he's still only in his early 50s. I mean, he's still, he's still a pretty young coach, relatively to, the average age of most coaches in the country. So, I mean, he can still coach for a long time. Now, I know he's made it very clear that he wants to, I mean, even today kind of hinted at like, I would love to, retire and go tailgate with the rest of the fans and, have a little more vacation time and not be so stressed on game day, which I love. I mean, like, and see, that's another thing. What blows my mind is I'm like, dude, he is one of us. He gets us. He is us. Like, he is NC State. Like, I know he's not won the ACC championship. I get that. But I'm sitting here saying that is the only bad thing I could say about the man. That's the only thing. Like, again, I mean, besides maybe also too that he doesn't have top 10 recruiting classes. I mean, I know we had Richard Washington on, just released episode a day ago as of this recording. And, he said, I would love to have, top 10 recruiting classes. And I'm like, well, yeah, I would too. But I would feel like that. I mean, unless you're Nick Saban or unless you're, Kirby Smart, it's very tough to be a top 10 recruiting class, but also be able to develop guys. It's usually one or the other. You either are getting all these guys, but struggle developing them, or you get, mid-tier guys, but you develop them. And so for me, I'd rather get the guys that Doeren wants and develop them than being UNC and getting these top big time guys like, Storm Duck, and then he's getting Moss and Tony Grimes getting mossed in the end zone. It's like those are 5 stars. And yet you have 3-star Mecca Mezzi, like, putting them on posters. So, again, that's another mini Doeren rant there from my end, but I can't help it. Again, I am Mr. I truly do believe that 90% of State fans are bought in on Doeren, but so to me, I'm kind of like starting like a picket fence, being like, I want Doeren to be 1% more accepted, each day, like, just I want it to be, slowly but surely until 100%, because that guy's a great thing for NC State, no doubt. Before we continue, I want to take a quick second to tell you about our sponsor, Flatlands Jessup Insurance Group, that has your whole world covered, with agents in 5 offices throughout eastern North Carolina to help you decide how much coverage you need, offering policies for home and auto, recreational vehicles, commercial, crop, health, life, and employee benefits. They are able to combine options to find a comprehensive solution that works for you. Flatlands Jessup protects the things you love so you can spend less time worrying and more time enjoying them. Find them on Facebook and Instagram at Flatlands Jessup. You can also visit their webpage at www.flatlandsjessup.com. So please make sure to go and check them out. So let's jump into the biggest news of the offseason, which happened fairly recently with Bradley Rozner coming to NC State, which for me, I think a lot of State fans was a huge, huge, huge win. I know you and I were, texting a little bit about it just between two of us. And I mean, even before he committed, saying, I mean, this is a guy that immediately brings more leadership to the offense. Brings experience, but also brings size, speed, you name it. He's a matchup, nightmare, but also too, I think primarily just more gives you the size. Cause I think looking at the wide receiver locker room, and I want to kind of get your thoughts, but like Florida State, they like one of the biggest things they like drool over with the Florida State is their wide receivers, or like they have like 3 wide receivers that are over 6'5" or 6'6". And so it's like, well, okay, well now we have a guy that's, 6'5", 6'6", so, and because we just don't have a lot of height, on the wide receiver side. So, I mean, is that extra dimension that is a really big key that Rozner can bring you a little bit more size to maybe run some fade routes or something like that where size is requested, maybe is the word for it.
I mean, of course. I mean, size isn't going to hurt, right? If you're fast and big, I'll take that all day. And
sure,
I do think, and there's been some interesting discussions, right? Of is the wide receiver room fine the way it is? Should you bring in another guy? I've kind of landed the whole offseason that if there's another guy out there, I think they should go get him. And my only hang up was I don't know who else is out there, right? That was my whole thing is I'd love to go get another guy. I don't know who you're going to get, and let's not waste a scholarship, right? So out of this whole situation, I'm astonished a player of the quality of Bradley Rozner was available that late in the game. Because let's face it, if he's in the portal, let's say in January, all these other teams that have open scholarships, I don't know if he ends up at NC State, right? I think the timing of this really played a role into him landing in Raleigh. Overall, I mean, what I've seen, just kind of watching his film, looking at numbers, I mean, if he can stay healthy, that is the big if in his whole, 8-year college career, right? I mean, it's wild. And so he really fills a spot. Like, I like him on the outside. When you look at how Robert and I likes those bigger guys that can work over the middle, right? Rozner could fit that role. One of the things, I think we talked about this a little bit in our text conversation. I felt last year, one of the pieces they really missed was the ability to catch that kind of deep sideline fade, so to speak, right? And I say that because who's the guy we're going to throw it to most likely? It's going to be Devin Carter. But at the same time, that is one of the major aspects. I felt he was so inconsistent, judging those balls over the shoulder, right? We've seen him short arm them and they end up too far out in front. We've kind of seen him just not really judge him. Right now, he's had some great ones. Don't get me wrong, but it's the inconsistency of it that I think kind of flashed to me. When you go back and look at Rozner, and I try not to just look at highlights, right? Actually pull up the game on YouTube, see the ones he didn't catch, right? Why didn't he catch all? But he seems very consistent in this particular aspect. He seems very comfortable catching the ball over his shoulder. So I think he kind of fills a void that existed, not even just last year, but with Devin Carter gone, I don't know. Maybe Timmons is that guy. Anthony Smith, maybe, I don't know. We've seen him kind of miss a few of them out there. I know there's a whole big debate about Anthony Smith. Don't get me wrong. I've read all of that. I've read that conversation. Part of me hesitated to jump in on it. But I kind of feel Rozner fills this hole. And the other thing, and this is part of our conversation as well, is with the transfer portal in this day and age, I find it hard to just simply say, yeah, we have a lot of potential, we're okay. It feels like you if you can go out and get a guy immediately with proven production, you don't have to just rely on potential all the time anymore, right? You don't have to build up these classes. And, I mean, how many years, think back pre-portal, or that a school like NC State might have to build up to a certain class. And you say, this is our year, right? So it's a lot of potential, maybe year 1 and year 2 and all that, while the production builds. We don't have to take so long anymore to do that. When I look at receiver, and it feels like that is one of the positions where there's usually a lot of them in the portal. That's the way I felt. I didn't know who was out there, but if there was somebody there that could fill that production hole that was missing, I think you go out and fill it. And so, I love the Rozner pickup. I really do. Hey, that's who I've kind of picked out of this group. Him and Julian Gray, I kind of have pegged when I look at the NI offense that I think big potential from the receiver position. I know Penix, right? I do think Penix will have a good year too. But in the receiver position, that's who I think really one of those two, if not both. I think one of them explodes this year. I really do.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel too. That like I was, feeling okay about the receiver room because like you said, I think we do have a lot of potential, but that's a big risk to bank on the potential.
Right.
But so getting a guy like Rozner, I mean it just made me feel like, okay, we're solid, and especially with the way a nice offense will work, hopefully, then that just solidifies my confidence in them.
Yeah. Well, and to me, like, kind of a metaphor, which I think about, when it comes to today's day and age, with how the transfer portal is that like, kind of look at it as that, like your roster is like an ice cream cup, right? Well, but like imagine like basically, obviously with every team, you get a certain amount of scholarships, right? So you're basically saying for this year, I have this much to use. Well, imagine that being the size of the cup. Basically the ice cream person says, I'm going to charge you a base price for that ice cream cup. So whatever you fit inside of it, I'm going to charge you the same amount no matter what. So I mean, so if like I'm a guy that loves like vanilla ice cream with some fudge and a brownie. So like I could just put that in there and I'd be very happy with that. But if I'm saying, hey, I got a little bit of room here to add some sprinkles, maybe a little bit of cookie dough on it. Sure, I'll take it. I'd be happy with just what I had, but if I can have that to make it a little bit better, if I'm still paying the same price no matter what, then before I eat this, then great. So to me, it's kind of like with Rozner. It's like, hey, listen, if I can add some, cookie dough to this Artie ice cream that I know I'm going to love, then great. I have no issue with it because at the end of the day, that scholarship is going to be used by somebody, whether it's a walk on or whatever it may be. So if it can go to a guy that can help us, at during a big moment, then so be it. Sounds Definitely. Good. So yeah. So I mean, metaphor was that pretty solid metaphor. Hopefully, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I like it.
There you go, man. That sounds pretty good.
Let's go. All right, appreciate it. I think with Rozner too, and maybe another thing too is that just since he came from Rice, not a whole lot of footage on him. Like, I know like even when he announced, like it was pretty much just the same replay, the same like 2 or 3 plays, highlights that he had during his time. And it's also interesting too because JT Daniels, the former USC, then Georgia, then West Virginia quarterback, transferred to Rice, and then Rozner transfers out. So it's kind of interesting, like being like, well, you just had
Daniels must be kicking himself.
No kidding. So anyway, though, but now I think talking about the offensive line, to me, I think this is like in the entire team, this is the only spot that I'm like, that I just kind of like, I see the potential and I hope it works out. But I think that there's a couple things. First of all, obviously having a new head coach. Losing Garrison last year and now bringing in Garrett Tujay, definitely kind of hinders just because now, Tujay has to learn, everybody, relearn their tendencies, even maybe put in their own, blocking protection, counts, whatever that may be, so a little bit of adjustment there. But to me, I think that, you have, your solid guys, you have your 3 main solid guys. And so I think my thing right now with offensive lines, I think you can make a starting lineup, but I think it's what's behind it that is kind of the question marks. Like I know the transfer from Oregon, is a guy that has experience from, at playing guard and tackle. So he could, maybe jump into one of those guard spots. But again, it's just like, okay, well, what's behind, the starting lineup? Like if one of these guys goes down, who's going to take their place, that we feel confident in. But I also want to say as well, though, that if I were to pick one position on the offense to have a little bit of a concern over, it'd be the offensive line, just because to me, like you got to have weapons. You got to have guys who can score the football. I mean, that's got to be priority, and like, especially since you saw what, Brandon Armstrong did during his time at UVA, where he didn't necessarily have the best offensive lines, but I mean, he definitely produced with it still. Mm-hmm. So, but you kind of give me your thoughts. So, I mean, would you kind of agree that, the starting lineup probably will be fine, but it's the depth behind it that will be the issue?
Yeah. Offensive line is definitely number 1 on my list in terms of I'm eager to see how this plays out through fall camp. I do believe there's some potential holes there. I do. Now, that's a tough position to grab in the transfer portal because, frankly, there are limited offensive linemen who can play at a high level. It is hard to get a quality one through the portal. No, I think they did pretty good to get Jaramillo. Alex G and myself, I think we're going to run it on the IPS website sometime here soon. We did a breakdown, got the coach's film from Oregon, breakdown of him playing the guard position, tackle position, talked about where we think he plays best. And I think we both, I'll tell you right now, we think he's a guard. We both think we landed on, because there was, when he first came to NC State, I think maybe Steve Williams interviewed him. I could be wrong on that, but Steve James, one of them. And he said, yeah, no, I'm potentially coming in to play tackle. I think both of us are like, no, he's a guard. Like I think that's his best position, but he did play tackle. If you think back, you remember when Oregon beat Ohio State in the Horseshoe a couple years ago? He played tackle, left tackle in that game. And so that's one of the games we look back on and kind of we're talking about his technique and stuff like that and just how he plays, right? How the aggressiveness level that he plays. And we think really it's probably a guard fit. But hey, as a whole, the offensive line, I do worry about the guard positions, both of them, frankly, left guard, right guard. I do. And I've said this actually since I think the clock hit 0 against Maryland in the bowl game, because as I went back and kind of broke that game down, I thought the guard positions did not play very well. I didn't, right? I think Eason has to improve some, frankly. Lyndon Cooper, very early in his career, I thought he needed to be stronger and to be able to anchor better at the guard position. He was allowing too much penetration and the depth of the pocket was shrinking. I thought we really struggled. I'll bring this up. We had so I always chart yards before contact, yards after contact on run plays. In that bowl game, the yards before contact in our running game was 0.17. That's atrocious. All right, that's atrocious.
Jeez.
I mean, they were not getting a push, right? And I look at that line and I say, this is somewhat what it's going to be to start the year potentially, right? So I actually came out of that game and I was like, man, we've got to kind of get this rectified for next year. I think Jaramillo plays one of the spots. Like, I think ultimately that's where he ends up. Left guard is where I would probably say, because that's where he played at Oregon in the guard spot, but I think he has to be there.
Well, especially it's Michael, let me add one thing and I'll let you add into here. So I just did a little bit of research, and so it's interesting. If you look at the roster for 2023 and you look at all the offensive line, there are only 5 upperclassmen. And those 5 are presumably the 5 starters: Anthony Belton, McMahon, McKay, Jaramillo, and Derek Eason. But then all the rest of them are sophomores or younger. So it's a very young room, very young, incredibly young. So go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I think, though, if you're going to have questions, I don't know if you agree with this or not, I think probably guard is the best place, because you can sometimes – because obviously center is most of the time calling your protections and
center's the quarterback
snapping the ball,
of the offensive line.
And then your tackles, we know those are
protect the edge,
second highest paid position in the NFL. But your guards, you can sometimes kind of hide your weaknesses there, whether you're helping with the center, helping off the center, helping off the tackle. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I mean, you can do different things, right, to kind of, whether it's, turning the center a certain way. I mean, you see this quite a bit. You play against a quality defensive tackle. Guess which way that center is going to turn 9 out of 10 times, right? He's going to help on that, high-end defensive tackle that's playing on the interior. So you can definitely help it. Slide protections, right, where you just kind of got everybody, you got elephants, in a row, just all moving in one direction. They're there helping each other out. So you can definitely do some things to help those interior positions. They're not as much of an island spot as, say, your left and right tackles. But I agree with you. I mean, Anthony Carter could step in there and play, right? There's somebody else. I know I'm blanking on him right now. There's a fourth one I had in my head before we started talking. I can't think of it right now.
Patrick Patine, or is he a tackle?
Hopefully.
He's tackle.
Who?
No. I had somebody else.
Hopefully Rylan Van, which, I mean, obviously if he's anything like a beast like his brother, then, I mean, hopefully he can be pretty half-decent offensive lineman too, so.
I'll say, too, about the O-line, right? So I think guard spot is where I'm most interested, just to kind of see, what kind of do they potentially land on a rotation to kind of start? Are they going to be set? I mean, because I think it could go a number of different ways, frankly. But I think you also need to pay attention to the left tackle spot, right? So Anthony Belton's out there, right? And we saw the other day Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl tweeting about Anthony Belton. It seemed like some other teams were potentially sniffing around Anthony Belton to see if he's willing to get in the portal, because you do not come across guys with his traits every day, right?
Yeah.
Big, long arms. I mean, he seems like he can move in that small box that is left tackle at times, right? Can, do some things that not everybody can do. But let's keep in mind, he did start last year, and he did eventually kind of lose his starting spot, right?
Yeah.
And I went back and watched some
Anthony
of the
Belton.
Yeah.
Yep.
By the end of the year,
yeah.
he wasn't. They
put
starting.
Spees. Yeah, they put Spees at left tackle, and McKay was at right tackle. So towards the end of the year, second half of the year, he was playing more sparingly. He played each game, I'm pretty sure, but it was sparing. And so I think when you go back and watch him, my kind of note on his game was he needs a little bit of that icky, right? He's a big dude. He needs to get a little nastier, in my opinion. I thought he let defensive ends kind of get into him first and initiate contact on too much of a regular basis, and that too much influenced his actions. I'd like to see him be a little more offensive in the way he approaches that position. But the other thing, which I'll say, and now this is defending him, last year, think about who NC State played. When you talk about the edge position, they played a tremendous group of edge rushers, whether you're talking Tyree Wilson, who was a top 5 pick in the NFL draft from Texas Tech, to Miles Murphy. They played a little bit of Jared Verse. I know he was not healthy the whole game, but they played a tremendous group of pass rushers last year, especially off the edge. They are not going to have that same group this year. So he's got that experience. He did get beat some, right? Mm-hmm. I'll tell you this, Miles Murphy gave him a hard time in that Clemson game, right? He went up against a high-end NFL pass rusher. He's now got that in his back pocket, right? And so I think that eventually helps him, but pay attention to this left tackle spot, right? Can he learn from it? He has the traits that everybody wants in a left tackle. Now it's a matter of building that experience to go with it.
Yeah, I agree. Now, my last question here to kind of wrap this up, Phillip, is so I know that, again, make sure Wolfpack Nation to go check out Phillip and Alex's breakdowns of, all of the opponents. I think you've done you've done 4 per part, and you've done 2 parts, so you've done the first 8 teams so far, correct, Phillip?
Yep. And we've got the third one recorded, so it's coming out soon. So.
On the way, cool. So make sure to go and check that out. But so I know you did talk about the UConn game, which for me is a big one because, first of all, it's the first game. It's the next game on the schedule, but also too because I made the decision to join my good buddy Greg the Leg and fly up the day of for the UConn game and go check it out. And, seeing UConn, how they're really, trying to sell that game out, and there's a lot of hype for that game. But I also see where, anywhere, depending on where you look, a 15, 16 point favorite.
Mm-hmm.
But I also too heard, and I'm sure Phillip hopefully this doesn't really give too much of your insight away to, basically take away all the insight that you would give. But one of the things which I think it was either you or Alex that asked the question of, do you predict, NC State to use, to not really show all their cards, to try and save some of their cards for Notre Dame? And you were like, yeah, no, I expect that. So, should I be concerned at all? Not at all. Should I be relatively concerned, or should I feel pretty confident heading to that game? Because I will be honest, especially heading into a game, first game of the year, new offense, new quarterback, a very hyped UConn team that, even though we crushed them last year
on the road,
they're getting. It's on the road. They're getting a little bit more excited. I'm sitting here going, oh my God, I really hope I'm not about to fly all the way up there just to see us lose the first game of the year. That would be awful.
Oh, goodness.
Awful.
Oh,
yeah.
It's not going to be last year, in my opinion, right? Last year was just a bloodbath. But to me, Connecticut's still a team that has a lot of questions. They have 2 quarterbacks that they could go with. I don't think they're going to name the quarterback probably until right before game time. But frankly, I kind of think they played the same way. So I think you get ready. This, they're both running based. I still think this is going to be a team that's going to they want to run the ball 35 times a game if they can, right? That is a successful game. If they can get to that, they're probably going to win. And so I think, obviously, you start with stopping the run against them. They do have some pretty good defensive players, which, they had the defensive tackle that came out in the NFL draft a couple of years ago. They have another kid, edge rusher on the line right now, and another guy in the secondary. Two pretty high-end players. They'll probably go in the NFL. So they do have some players, don't get me wrong. But, yeah, I did. So I was actually, when I asked Alex this question, I said, do you think they hold back? Is Connecticut good enough that they have to actually show the full playbook, or can they do enough, get by, save a few things for Notre Dame, which I think they probably will regardless. But what'd you say the line was, 15-16?
15, 16, depending on where you look. Yeah.
Okay, I hadn't seen the line on this one yet. 15-16.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I mean, I think I'm still probably leaning State will cover that. And I know it's a big number. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sure I would put money on it, but I would think if we're just picking, I think I'd probably still take State. I just think State is overall a better team. UConn did make a bowl game last year, but a little bit smoke and mirrors, in my opinion. They hit some teams just right. Like Liberty, they hit Liberty as Hugh Freeze was walking out the door, and Liberty just quit, right? And so they hit some teams right. They just did, right? And they made a bowl game. Good for their program. They hadn't done that in a long time. But then they go up against Marshall in the bowl game, and they act like they've never seen offensive football in their life. And it was one of the worst offensive performances for about 50 minutes until the end, and Marshall kind of backed off. But I still remember that Myrtle Beach bowl game, watching it. That was one of those games that's on like a Thursday at 2:00, right? And I remember having it on while I'm working, and just UConn cannot move the ball offensively. Like, it was just awful to watch. So that is my lasting memory. It is. And so maybe I'm too biased by it, but I'm just not sure you get that much better in the offseason knowing they didn't change major pieces of it.
Right. Well, and the fact that, like, the biggest thing comes to mind for me is Vegas knows everything, and so I look at last year and I look at the ECU game, and I think we were like 8-9 point favorites, I think, heading into that game for ECU.
Yeah,
right, Michael?
I think by game time it got down to 8.5 or 9. Yeah,
right. So not overwhelming favorites, like favorites, but not like like, oh, you should beat the brakes off in favorites. But now you go into, once again, a game that I'm sure UConn fans are very excited about, no doubt. I mean, again, they're trying to sell the thing out, and so a lot of people say, well, is this a trap game? And for me, I always look at it as a trap game. Trap game shouldn't be the first game of the year. To me, that should be a definition of a trap game, is the first game of the year, because you should be focused on that. Now, I know a lot of people might say, well, we almost lost to ECU last year. And I would say, well, but see, trap game for me more of is a game where you go into it and you think you're going to, you're going to, smoke them. And so you're looking to the next game. And so you're just not really focused there mentally. We didn't almost lose that game against ECU because I think we were not focused. I think it's honestly, we thought it was just a one-time thing, but it really was a story that there was just issues that offensively that we just never figured out the whole season, for the most part. And ECU just took advantage, and just, we put our defense in some really tough spots, and also obviously some decisions that bit us in the butt, such as the going for on 4th and goal, where, in hindsight 2020, if you had kicked that, 13-yard field goal, then, it wouldn't have even been close, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of my biggest thing is, for all the people saying, well, we almost lost to ECU last year. Well, a little bit different, but, hopefully this year is a little different.
So I'll say Coach Doeren mentioned this today, and I think this is very applicable to Connecticut. This will be a tough prep for them, right? Just think about Robert and I through a 10-year span, right? So I know in my offseason work, I kind of worked the last 10 years looking at Anai offenses. He's had the fastest offense in the country in terms of tempo. He's had one of the slowest. He's had teams that threw it 500-something times, and he had the BYU team that was the top rushing offense in the country. Last year at Syracuse, they ran it 90 more times than they threw it. Year before, you've got UVA just number 2 in the country in passing. I think it's a very hard prep, because how does Anai, through fall camp, see the pieces fitting and say, all right, here's how we can attack them? No film, Brennan Armstrong coming in. I assume they're going to rely on 2021 film and not last year's, but I think this is a very tough prep for UConn. So, I mean, I feel worse being in their shoes than our shoes for sure. So, I mean, I think State will be okay.
Well, especially since the only insight which Connecticut may have gotten for today is to hear that state potentially wants to run some Kansas City Chief offensive plays, which I'm sitting there going, well, that helps you none, because Kansas City's offense is completely just out of the blue. Like who the heck knows what Kansas City and Andy Reid are going to come up with? So yeah, I agree. That's a great point though. That there'll be a tough prep for them for sure. So especially since again, knocking on wood over here, we should be fairly healthy heading into that game. So that should be a big thing too. But anyway, Phil, well, thank you so much again for your time. Really do appreciate it. This was a ton of fun. Really loved this conversation. And so first of all, once again, just Wolfpack Nation, just make sure to go check out Inside Pack Sports. James Henderson and Steve Williams do a great job over there, and have a great team over there, including Phillip Danford, who again does some unbelievable film breakdowns. So if you want to check out more of Phillip's stuff, make sure to go and check out IPS, and again, a ton of great inside content there, even beyond just the fan and the fan side that we at Tuffy Talk give here. So anything else, Phillip, at all that I forgot to plug in there?
No, you're good, guys, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on. I like speaking ball, talking ball with you guys, and I'm from a distance, right? I appreciate everything you guys have built with Tuffy Talk, right? I look at it and what you've done over the years, and it's impressive, right? This is not easy to get up here and do and create content. Sure. I get that, right? It's not. I sit down some nights and I'm like, what am I going to write about? What am I going to make a video about? And you guys are doing this every week throughout the year. I'm only doing it really like hardcore during football season. Off season's easy because I can spread it out. I mean, what you guys have done is I have a ton of appreciation for. So great job.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. That means a lot. Yeah, no. And again, y'all, if you want to check out more of the NC State content, which again, during this August time period, we're coming out with a crap ton of content. So make sure, if you do not want to miss out on that, hit that free subscribe button, hit that notification bell. If you enjoyed this conversation, hit that like button, and make sure to give us a follow, Tuffy Talk Now, on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. But God bless you, Wolfpack Nation. We'll see y'all soon, and go Pack, y'all.